Hello there, everyone, and welcome to GamePoints episode 346. A weekly little get together, we talk about recent gaming news. I'm as always your host, Tim Brown, and tonight, Hogwarts Legacy seems to be selling bigly, and we have to ask if Game Pass is bad for Microsoft. But first, I want everyone here to know this is an audience interactive podcast, so if you're watching us live here at Twitch TV/GamePoints every Tuesday at 8 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, that is, feel free to join the conversation. Can't watch us live? Feel free to comment down below. Be watching on a myriad of video platforms over at Rumble, BitChute, YouTube, etc. Just try to keep them germane to the topics on hand. All right, let's go ahead and get right into the very first story here from GameIndustry.biz. This and all links to our articles will, of course, be posted down there somewhere in the description or over on our Discord server. From GameIndustry.biz. Hogwarts Legacy is the biggest Harry Potter game launch of all time. Now, notice the conditional phrases there. They're specifically limited to Harry Potter games, of which there are like 10 to 15 of. So it's not that big of a list. So, of course, the biggest budget of them all would stand reason to be the biggest selling of them all. But it does go a little bit beyond that to the article itself. Hogwarts Legacy has gotten off to a very big start at UK Games Retail and is comfortably #1 game of the week, according to GfK data. Important to note, this is only for UK Games Retail. I know that's a very specific part of the world and a very, I don't want to say isolated geographical location, but it's the UK. It's not the United States, it's not China, it's not Japan, it's the UK. That said, you can kind of use it as a microcosm of what the rest of the sales globally are going to be on this game. It's interesting to take a look at the UK numbers because they're so open with them traditionally there, and they tend to have them out pretty quick. Anyways, back to the article. It's the biggest launch for any Harry Potter game ever, with sales 64% higher than the previous best, Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone from 2001. In fact, it was the biggest week for Harry Potter game that wasn't a large week at all. It was the second week of the. In fact, the biggest week for a Harry Potter game wasn't a launch week at all. It was the second week of the Philosopher's Stone due to the hype around the movie. Even compared to that week, Hogwarts Legacy was still bigger by 2%. I assure you, I can read. This result's even more impressive when you consider that this is just for physical sales. Hogwarts Legacy would have received a substantial number of digital downloads, and that data will come in later in the week. Compared to last year's big fantasy release, which was Elden Ring, Hogwarts Legacy's first week sales are up 80%. That's big. I'm very interested to see what final numbers on this game are going to be, but it is going to be selling bigly, as a certain orange man would say. Moving on with the article. 82% of Hogwarts Legacy sales were on the PlayStation 5, with the remaining 18% on Xbox Series S and X. Digital sales will likely reduce that gap between the two platforms, as Xbox's digital sales tends to be higher than it is physical. Expect the game to continue, however, around the charts, with PlayStation 4, Xbox One, and Nintendo Switch versions of the game due to arrive in the coming months. That's right, you still have another wave of releases for Hogwarts Legacy coming as it gets released on last generation platforms. Only current gen and PC are available right now for this game. Who knows how it's going to run on those older platforms? The reason why they're delayed could be PR reasons. You release the good game now and then kind of release the shit ones later after you've already gotten all the buzz you can from it. So be aware of that. I am inherently distrustful when they release a last generation version of the game a few months later. It tends to run poorly. I know I touched on this last week about how this game seemed to be going very well when it comes to sales and player engagement, despite the myriad of controversies that are swarming around this specific title. And I think, just to reiterate what I mentioned last week, that if there's anything to be taken away from Hogwarts Legacy selling as well as it has been, is that people are fucking tired of the forever outrage. We've mentioned that before. I don't even want to say they're tired. I doubt people are even buying this as like a fuck you, I'll buy what I want kind of situation. I think they just see what they think is a good game, or they're Harry Potter fans, and they probably don't even know about the controversy. The vast majority of people out there who play games aren't like you or I or anyone else who watches podcasts and keeps their nose to Twitter or any other social media for whatever information might come out. They're the rando soccer mom who buys 2 or 3 games for their kid a year. They're the person who buys Madden and Call of Duty, and that's it for the entire year, with maybe whatever one rando game comes along. They are apolitical. They have no horse in this race. They are disconnected from the insanity that is online debate. And we should all be so lucky. What this shows, in my opinion, is that people are liking the game. And that word of mouth is causing it to get sales even stronger. I'm willing to bet that if you do an exit interview to everyone who bought this game physically, keep in mind, digitally, probably going to even be higher considering that digital sales keep increasing every year. If you were to do an exit poll of people coming out of GameStop or Game, which I think is the retailer in the UK, or Walmart, Target, etc., and go, hey, how did you hear about this game? They're probably going to go, well, I saw a commercial on TV. Or a friend of mine was telling me about it and it sounded cool. I'd be willing to bet the vast majority of those people, when asked, so what do you think about the controversy surrounding this game, are going to go, what controversy? What are you talking about? And I'd be willing to bet a significant portion of those people are also lying about not hearing about controversy because they just don't care. They don't want to be wrapped up in this bullshit. And to just reiterate what I mentioned last week, this is a signal flare to every entertainment company out there, or just companies in general, that you don't have to capitulate to the modern day censor, to the equivalent of the Scientologist, who will seek out heresy in any of its forms and try to purge it from society, regardless of how minor your slight might be. Beware of the people who want to control what you can see, hear, read, consume, etc. They want nothing more than your complete subservience. Do not let them even get a foothold in the door. Anyways, as I said, I'm really looking forward to seeing the sales numbers of this game when it pans out. The controversy aside, it looks solid. I'm not a Harry Potter fan. I'm still on the fence if I'm going to pick this game up or not because of that. But if I just look at it from a pure gameplay standpoint, it looks fine. It seems to be kind of a collect-a-thon. So remember those map games Ubisoft was known for? They really haven't done anything in a while. But where it's like you have the checkbox, the list of checkboxes, get this number of collectibles, find this many jelly beans, get this many magical hats. I don't know what's in the game, but you know what I'm saying. A checkbox game. Explore the map, find the shit, get the achievements. And those games do have a place. And it's been a while since I've played one. So I might actually break down and pick this up just as a sit back, tune out, put on a podcast or an album or catch up on whatever book on tape you're reading and just grind it out senselessly as you're listening to something else. That's what this game screams to me. And I do enjoy those games. It's been a while. So I might break down and get this. I haven't made up a mind on it yet, but it seems like mindless fun. Anyways, let me know what you guys think down below. If you've bought the game, let me know what you think about it too. Just try to keep it civil, please. Moving on to the next topic. While we're on the discussion of game sales, this is via IGN. And remember, once again, all links to this story and the others we use today will be provided down below. From IGN, Dead Space was the best-selling new game in the US of January 2023. This is 100% a passion piece that I put up on here because I love Dead Space. I love knowing that it seems to be doing very well for EA in the hopes that they return back to the franchise. There are some tidbits in the remake, by the way. that seem to allude that that is a possibility in the future. Hopefully, we don't have to wait as long, since the groundwork for 2 and technically 3 have already been laid out by remaking the first one. They can just use that engine again. I'm not saying that they don't have work to do to go recreate the Sprawl, or what was it, Talentus 4, or whatever the ice planet was on Dead Space 3, assuming they even continue that storyline. But getting that engine with its amazing lighting capability, by the way, some of the most impressive lighting I've ever seen in a video game is in that goddamn Dead Space remake. Getting that out of the way certainly will speed up development time on the other games, assuming EA chooses to do so. And since it was the best-selling game so far of January, I'd imagine that a future installment of Dead Space, be it Dead Space 4 or 2 remake or whatever they're going to do, has been greenlit. I would imagine. I'll be shocked if they don't continue pushing this franchise, given how well it seems to be doing. To the article itself. The latest figures from the MPD group reveal that Dead Space is the best-selling new video game in the US in January. Once again, notice the conditional phrases there. Not best-selling video game in January. Best-selling new video game in January, as in stuff that was released in January. An admittedly thin month. Not barren, but thin. The well-received remake of the 2008 survival horror was kept away from the top spot by Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2, which enjoys its 4th consecutive month as the best-selling game in the US. Dead Space was joined in the top 20 bestsellers by 3 other new games: Fire Emblem Engage at 5, Forspoken at 7, and One Piece Odyssey at number 9. While there were 4 new releases among the top 10, US consumer spending on video game software, hardware, and accessories dropped year-on-year by 5%. Once again, foreshadowing the fact that we are... Well, this in particular is a major things. 1, we're not all trapped in our homes anymore. So we can actually go out and do other things and play video games. 2, well, I was never trapped in my home. That's a tangent I don't want to get on. And 2, we are... things ain't getting better economically. I know I've gone on this rant a couple times on this show recently, but it is going to get worse. So expect declines as the years go on. As the months go on, I am going to mute my mic because I'm about to sneeze. I did not sneeze. So be it. Video game hardware spending was flat while Matt Piscatella said the following. Video game hardware spending was flat while content down 5% and accessories spending fell. He revealed on Twitter. This dropped from $4.5 billion to $3.4 billion, or $4.5 billion to $4.5 billion to $4.5 billion to $4.3 billion. Once again, I swear I can read. Means sales are down year on year for the first time since last September. So people are still buying consoles at the same rate they were this time last year. But the accessories and games have dropped. Because, well, everyone's tightening their belts. That's just the side story to this. I'm just excited to see that Dead Space is doing well. I'm really looking forward to see what they might do with that in the future. Speaking of game sales, now I want to tie this story back to the Hogwarts Legacy story from earlier. And this asks the question in the title, is Game Pass hurting Microsoft? The answer seems to be yes. Microsoft confirms that Game Pass cannibalizes sales, according to this article here from GameIndustry.biz. Now, before I move on here, I want to go back to that very first article from GamesIndustry.biz. Right here. 82% of Hogwarts Legacy sales were on the PlayStation 5, with the remaining 18% on Xbox Series S and X. Now, you can read that to a many number of ways. It could be more PlayStation 5s out there. Fair enough. You could just have a bigger Harry Potter fan base on there because the people who buy the Series X and X are a very specific customer. Maybe. Or it could also be, this, by the way, is going to be a combination of all these things. But one thing that I think that people don't realize when it comes to this is that Microsoft Game Pass has just trained people not to buy games for Xbox. I have Game Pass. I haven't bought a game for Xbox specifically in years. Because why would I? Hell, it's training me not to buy games on Steam when they first come out unless it's like a major release. Because there's a good chance, if not on day of, within the next month, if it's like an indie game, it'll be on Game Pass. I think Game Pass is not only actively hurting Microsoft, which is, I think Xbox makes up I think their gaming division makes up such a small portion of Microsoft's overall revenue. It could just go bankrupt and they wouldn't notice. But it's also hurting places like Steam and to a lesser degree Sony and Nintendo. Because why would I buy the hot new indie game on Steam when it's probably free on Game Pass? Anyways, to the article here itself. The UK Competition and Markets Authority provisional report on the Microsoft Activision Blizzard acquisition includes an admission from Microsoft that putting games into its Game Pass subscription service cannibalizes sales of those titles. The CMA noted the following in its report. Microsoft also submitted that the internal analysis shows a redacted % decline in base game sales 12 months following their addition on Game Pass. I wish we had that percentage. I really, really wish that, because it could be it could be 2 or 3%, or it could be 50, 60, 70, 80%. If we go back to that comparison between the two sales of Hogwarts Legacy earlier, where roughly 80% of the copies were sold on Sony platforms and only 20% on Microsoft, that's pretty damning. And yes, Hogwarts Legacy isn't on Game Pass, but people are being conditioned not to buy things on Microsoft systems. Why? There's a good chance it'll show up on Game Pass eventually. And if it's Microsoft first party, it's there day one. Anyways, back to the article itself. That confirmation runs counter to claims Xbox head Phil Spencer made in 2018 that Game Pass boosts sales rather than undermine them. Spencer said the following. When you put a game like Forza Horizon 4 on Game Pass, you instantly have more players in the game, which is actually leading to more sales of the game. You say, well, it isn't for everyone, just going to subscribe for $10 and go play this thing. Well, you say, isn't everyone just going to subscribe for $10 and go play this thing? But no, gamers find things to play based on what everyone else is playing, end quote. To be fair, he made that in 2018, and that could have been true in 2018. Where they didn't notice any noticeable drop in game sales. It's been about 5 years since then, though. And, as I've also mentioned a few times on the show, as nice as Phil Spencer seems, the gaming community seems to adore him in general, and he is an excellent spokesperson for Microsoft and the Xbox brand. He tends to use a lot of weasel words, and he tends to talk out of both sides of his mouth. He is one of the masters at saying hundreds of words without saying anything at all. You can't ever nail him down on a solid answer. And he uses a lot of vagaries to kind of obscure what the numbers behind the games actually are over at Microsoft. Remember, one of GamePoints' axioms. If something is doing well, a company won't shut up about it. If something is performing below expectations, you won't hear a goddamn thing about it. So, if Game Pass was doing gangbusters, we would be getting raw numbers. Not weasel words like it's meeting expectations or it's doing or it's doing fine. You would be told unequivocally that it is selling hundreds of millions of subscriptions. We are making 58% profit on it year over year. You would be given hard numbers if Game Pass was profitable for Microsoft. But I'm telling you, it is not. Microsoft, in my opinion, is deliberately taking a loss on the Game Pass experiment year over year over year in an effort to do what Walmart does. They sell things at cost or even below cost to drive out competition and become the sole game in town. Now, cool, that means you get some cheap shit. I, once again, will admit I subscribe to Game Pass. I do so because I like getting shit for cheap. But that does harm the industry overall. The overall health of the video game industry is actively being damaged by Game Pass, in my opinion. Because they want to be the Netflix of video games. They want to be the only game in town where you just buy a subscription to them every month rather than anything physical and go from there. And then everyone is beholden to that. I believe Spencer himself has been adamant in saying we would love to have Game Pass on Sony and Switch. I think the Switch one actually might happen one day. I doubt the Sony one ever will, especially given the Activision Blizzard nonsense that's going on there between those two companies. But that is what they're trying to do. They're trying to muscle out all the competition, as shown by their aggressive acquisitions, as shown by their aggressive pricing on Game Pass, to make it to make gaming in general so unprofitable that everyone else is driven out of business. And then they, being only the people in town, get 100% of everything. Now, that Nintendo and mobile gaming aside, because mobile gaming is kind of its own thing on its own, and Nintendo marches to the beat of its own drum, as they always have. But that feels like what's going on here, and that Game Pass, I think we're just getting confirmation, or at least I am, for what I've been saying for a while now. It don't make Microsoft money. Now, is it actively hurting Microsoft, which is the question? Well, that question is that answer is it depends. If you're only looking at it as does it cost Microsoft more money to run it than it brings in, I think that is undoubtedly true at this point. I think it's clear that they run Game Pass at a loss. However, if you look at the overall strategy that they're trying to employ here, will it hurt Microsoft in the end? It doesn't actually matter, because Microsoft's so big they can take a 100% loss on their Xbox division and wouldn't even bat an eye. Hey there, Aid, how are you doing? Good to have you in chat as always. Hope you're doing well. Anyways, that's my state. That's my state. Sorry, I'm reading ahead. That's my stance on it. Let me know what you guys think down below. Let's go ahead and move on to the next topic here. This is from Insider Gaming, by the way. Seems that PlayStation Studios might have accidentally announced that they bought Ballistic Moon, which is a dev. They haven't officially announced it yet, but there's some advertisements and some job postings that make us think that this might have occurred. Let's go to the article itself. The job advert for a senior dialogue designer based in London states that PlayStation is looking for someone to work on a major AAA projects alongside our partners as studios such as Naughty Dog, Santa Monica Studios, Guerrilla Games, Firesprite, Ballistic Moon, London Studios, Housemarque, Media Marvel, Insomniac Games, Sucker Punch Productions, and more. Now, here's the thing. Everything on there is Sony first party, except for Ballistic Moon. Now, the studio hasn't officially declared a first party studio yet, but the fact that they would include them in there with this list of nothing but first party studios might mean we get an announcement of them acquiring them soon. This all, of course, ties into the fact that there's been rumors of a state of play getting tossed around by some big people, mainly Jeff Grubb, but that we might see one at the end of February, maybe even in March, with a showcase later on in June, which I do believe it's been a while since we've seen one of those. But the reason why Sony might not necessarily be announcing that they've bought this in a public reasoning yet is because the Activision Blizzard shit going down. Sony has been keeping their exclusives announcements for exclusives very close to their chest because they don't want to provide ammo to Microsoft with the ongoing litigation on there. This is one of the reasons why it seemed that this big Silent Hill dump of information we had a few months ago seemed so put together at the last second. Because the rumor was some of that was supposed to be announced at a Sony State of Play. And instead, since they don't want to give any aid to Microsoft in its acquisition of Activision Blizzard, they just said, we're not going to do that. Konami, do your own thing and announce it there. That's what the rumor is. Now, Ballistic Moon would make sense that they were getting gobbled up by Sony. They have a history of working with Sony. The studio is mainly made up of supermassive game developers who they themselves worked on Until Dawn, a Sony exclusive. And they're also working on, Ballistic Moon is, that is, working on a PS5 single-player narrative-based game called, at least under the codename, Project Bates. Whatever the hell that is, I don't know. But there's a lot of stuff Sony has on deck that they need to show off soon. Yeah, the PlayStation VR 2 coming out in a week or so. Now, they did that VR 2 showcase, I'm sure, but you can also come up and kind of get some extra information on that. You have whatever the Last of Us game that they're working on, Last of Us Factions, for lack of a better term right now, their multiplayer experience. You have this Project Bates. You have the rumored wireless earbuds that Sony is developing. All of these things coming out around the same time really do suggest that there is going to be a state of play sometime soon to address it all. My gut tells me you'll see one within the next 3 weeks, a smaller one. I think they'll save their big showcase for around that E3 time, maybe a couple weeks before or after, so they can kind of just have the spotlight to themselves rather than sharing it with Microsoft, Nintendo, and whatever else is going to be at E3, even though none of them are going to be. So expect some news from Sony soon, but we'll see. Important to note that this does not mean that they have bought Ballistic Moon, by the way. This is just a rumor. And people are kind of piecing it together and going from there. We'll see how it shakes out, but I wouldn't be surprised if they did buy the studio and they're just like choosing not to advertise it because of the aforementioned reasons I said earlier. All right, moving on to the next story here. This is from Video Game Chronicle. Once again, another personal story I slid in here just because I love Alan Wake so much. Alan Wake 2 is now playable from start to finish, Remedy says. Once again, this is from Video Game Chronicle. If you want to read the article itself, down in the description. Development of Alan Wake 2 has reached a stage where the game can be played from start to finish, Remedy has stated. In the comments made during the following publication of the studio's latest financial results, CEO Tero Virtala said the development of the sequel is going well. Alan Wake 2 is in full production, he explained. The game will soon have all content in place and is playable from start to finish. We will then move on to polishing the experience. Alan Wake is a unique brand that holds high value for the company today. Virtala also noted that Alan Wake Remastered, which was released in October of 2021, has yet to generate royalties for the studio. But he hopes Alan Wake 2 still boosts sales. That's kind of a shame, by the way. So that means whoever they went and published it for, I think they went with 505. I'm not positive off the top of my head. A lot of these agreements usually come out to where it's like, hey, we will pay for the development, the publishing of the game, marketing, and after we recoup losses on that, then we split whatever remaining revenue is left 50-50, 30-40, or 40-60, 70-30, etc. The fact that Alan Wake Remastered has not earned Remedy a single dime yet in royalties means it did not make up whatever the initial cost was to create it, whatever the publisher put up front to eat its cost on there. Sure, there could also be other things included in that agreement, meaning that they have to sell X number of dollars before Remedy starts getting paid out on it. But that sucks to hear they put so much work into it and still haven't received any money from it. And now, this late on, probably not going to. I'm really hoping that Alan Wake 2 does well. I don't think Remedy is going bye-bye anytime soon. They've proven that they can make games on a relatively low budget and make them excellent. Control is a perfect example for that. But that doesn't mean that you can be forward to taking losses on things that you're making. At the very least, I hope they're able to break even and keep everyone fed so they can keep creating excellent content. As far as Alan Wake 2, I do think that the success of the Dead Space remaster bodes well for this game. Because there's a hunger out there for high budget survival horror, or just horror games in general. I think the Capcom Resident Evils also highlight that their recent remasterings and remakes of Resident Evil 2 and 3 and the upcoming Resident Evil 4, along with Dead Space Remake, shows that people are eager to get their hands on some new survival horror. However, there's a big elephant in the room when it comes to that genre specifically. That elephant's the Callisto Protocol. A multi-million-dollar game that seems to have failed to really bust into the zeitgeist at all. It looked very promising, and then it kind of came and went with very little fanfare. I don't know if I can lay the 100% blame on that, the feat of its weird control scheme. But it does play weird, by the way. It's hard to put into words how that game plays. But there are many issues with the Callisto Protocol. It is kind of buggy. It's also just very short, and it just ends. So it's not necessarily a slam dunk for every survival horror game that's out there. But I think we are kind of entering a second golden age of horror. And I'm really looking forward to it. Hey there, Jukebox Hero. How you doing? Yeah, bugs absolutely weighed it down a lot. Callisto Protocol did have some weird bugs behind it. And it also had some of the worst looking fire I have ever seen in a video game. Like, laughably bad for its budget. Now, I want Striking Distance to make another survival horror game. Specifically with a science fiction tinge to it. I don't need to go back to the Callisto Protocol universe, and trust me, they can the way it ended. But I would like to see them do something with it. I just think that game had a identity crisis almost from the start. Because people kept comparing it to Dead Space, which is one of the greatest survival horror games of all time. That's already a hard bar to live up to. But it started off life as a connected story to the PUBG universe, and then they canceled that, and now it was its own standalone thing. It never really seemed to materialize into something. And it's just unfortunate that it was received as lukewarm as it was. Let's take a look at chat here. They totally can make a sequel. They could take all the criticisms to heart, and the second would be a hit. Maybe. We'll see. That game was ungodly expensive. Like, laughably expensive for what it was. I don't have the numbers, like, in front of me, but there are games that you would think would have a bigger budget, but don't, compared to how much money was spent on the Callisto Protocol. I wish I had that number in front of me. Let's see if I can find it real quick. But I want to say it was like 250 million or something like that. Let's see if I can find it. Callisto Protocol has a reported budget of 160 million without marketing. You can add another 100 million on top of that for marketing. Between another 50 to 100 million on that with marketing. That game cost a lot of money to make, and there is no way it's making that money back. It's just not going to. So just because it seems like we're in a renaissance survival horror, and just because it seems like people are eager to sink their teeth into it, doesn't mean that we actually are there. It could also just be nostalgia for old shit. Because we're all dreading the future and we're terrified of the present, so we look for comfort in the past. Dead Space, Resident Evil, etc. Anyways, moving on, while we're talking about horror games, from Games Radar, Evil Within 3 seemingly teased in Hi-Fi Rush Easter egg. Evil Within 3 hasn't been announced, but the first indicator of existence seems to be a very subtle Easter egg hidden in Tango Gameworks' latest release, Hi-Fi Rush. Tango Gameworks, of course, being the same studio that made, well, Evil Within. Hi-Fi Rush seems to be full of references to the Evil Within, but a newly uncovered Easter egg is the first to tease a new entry in the series. Games Radar Plus was tipped off to an extremely subtle reference by an eagle-eyed reader, and I have since verified it myself. I, in this case, being the writer of the article. During the cinematic preceding Track 11, The Needle Drop, Chai and company are taking an elevator ride to meet Kale, the CEO of the Vanderlei Corporation and the game's final boss. Spoilers, I guess. Just as the elevator reaches its destination, you get a split-second look at the screen that shows you arrived at floor 776. That right there. At the bottom of the screen, in small print, is a feed, weather news, and next to news it reads, and you can see down there in the Chiron, sequel to popular survival horror franchise announced. That is a really really thin connection to the Evil Within 3, but it could possibly exist. Remember, Ghostwire Tokyo, which was Tango Gameworks' previous game, was originally supposed to be a Evil Within sequel, the Evil Within 3, but because they were going in such a radically different direction with it, they decided to turn it into its own game. Papa Stalin, I have links turned off, so unfortunately I am not going to be able to see that, but thank you for joining us. So, does this mean Evil Within 3 is coming? I don't know. Tango Gameworks they're weird. And there is, I think, enough demand for the Evil Within 3 that they would go ahead and make it. They seem to be able to just get away with making whatever they want. Hi-Fi Rush being an example of that, a game they made completely deviating from what they normally do, and stealth released. It came out the day it was announced, and apparently really good. I need to play it one day. I wonder how good, though, considering that they're not selling many copies of it because it's on GamePass. To tie it back into the overall conversation of today's show. But I'm told it slaps, and I need to sit down and play it one day. Let's take a look back at chat. You haven't played it yet, but you love to have it on your Switch. Feels bad, man. Yeah, I don't know if there's any word on it coming to other consoles, but if you have Game Pass, give it a hit. Just don't stream it. I want to stream this game, but it has a lot of licensed music in it, and that means the evil naughty no copyright people will hammer my stream into oblivion if I even try to do so. So it is what it is. Normally I'd go into delays at this point of the show, but we don't actually have a delays. If anything, we have something being moved up. Dead Island 2 getting pushed up another week. Now coming April 21st in 2023. It's rare that we get games pushed ahead by a week or 2 weeks or even a month in some cases. It's very, very rare that it happens. I have to wonder why they're doing it. I don't think there's anything in the way of when that is coming out. Let me take a look at my calendar here. But it also could be trying to hit a certain financial target. Maybe Embracer, I think, is the overlord of who's making Dead Island. I think it ties back to Embracer. Maybe they have a quarterly report due right before then. I don't know. But Dead Island 3 was, or Dead Island 2 was, yes. That's why. Originally scheduled for April 28th, now April 21st, because Star Wars Jedi Survivor is coming out April 28th now. So they're getting the hell out of the way. Not that Jedi Survivor is necessarily going to do gangbusters, but when you have something like Dead Island 2, you're going to need every bit of help that you can get. Not to necessarily bash a game before it's released or anything like that, but let's face it, given the development hell that this game has been in, given the number of hands and different developers that have been on top of this thing for years, given its near vaporware status, my bar is set very, very low for Dead Island 2. I'm not expecting much from it. But hey, I'm looking forward to be wrong. I remember the first game being kind of at best. I'm glad that team went on to do Dying Light, which was excellent. The second one, not so much. It's fine. But that first Dying Light game was excellent. One of the few times I've been actually scared in a game. And I don't mean just jump scares popping you, but tense. Going around that city at night in Dying Light is, it is a tense experience, to say the least. So yeah, Dead Island 2 coming out April 21st. See you in Hell A. I really don't like that tagline, but they seem committed to it. It is what it is. And that does it for the news, which does it for the show as well. This has been GamePoints episode 346, and thank you all for showing up. If you like what you saw here and you want to support the stream, you know what to do. Share the show, click follow, bits, subs, all that good stuff. There's a Discord you can join, link provided below down there. You can follow myself, Steam Brown, at Twitter at CapitalistPig21. You guys have been on the internet long enough. You know what everyone wants when it comes to these things, and your support is, of course, appreciated. To everyone in the chat, thank you for showing by. Ed, Jukebox Hero, Papa Stalin, I think I saw you in here earlier, Watermelon, and to everyone else who happens to be lurking, thank you. I will be back next week with more game news and then intermittently streaming video games throughout the week as well. So feel free to come on by then. Until next week, this has been GamePoints. I'm out of here.